Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar, Compass Coffee Talk. We're into some 33 episodes, I believe. Is that correct, Bill? Capsalis, my co-host. And we are so honored and pleased to have a special guest with us today, and that is Ibraheem Basir. He's the founder, CEO of A Dozen Cousins. Where's my dozen cousins? It's one of my favorite. It's one of my, here it is. One of my favorite products that I keep on the shelf.
Yeah.
Why? Because, I'm a busy guy, and when you need a meal, it's like this and some rice and, rice and beans, and you are good to go. And he's done it in some really, really interesting flavor profiles based on all the foods that he enjoyed from, and if I'm saying this correctly, just the whole kind of African-inspired diaspora around the world, from Latin America to the Caribbean to Africa. Really vibrant flavors and spices. If you have not tried A Dozen Cousins, we encourage you to do so. And then Ibraheem will tell us a little bit about his story. I want to thank you for joining us today. We are sponsored by Presence Marketing, Naturally Boulder, Naturally New York, and Naturally San Diego. If you are in major cities around the country, check into the Naturally Network. There are really great opportunities to market your brand and get connected with other industry leaders. As a matter of fact, Ibraheem, I believe that's how we met, was at the Naturally Bay Area Pitch Slam a few years ago, if I'm correct. So just want to get things kicked off. If you could maybe tell us a little bit about, because it goes, I think, into your family story and a little bit about your background, but how this all distilled into this really cool brand, A Dozen Cousins. And, we want to talk more about your work, your mission, et cetera. But if you could kind of start us off a little bit leading up to the inspiration of launching this brand.
Yeah, for sure. And first and foremost, thank you for having me. Thank you for the very kind intro. I appreciate it. I especially appreciate you having the product in your house. Every bean counts. So we appreciate the support.
Every bean counts. Good one.
Yeah. So, just to start off, I'm from Brooklyn originally, and I grew up in a really big family. So I have 9 siblings, 11 nieces and nephews. And then when my eldest daughter was born, she was the 12th cousin, which is where the brand gets its name from. And, I always start there just because food was really central to my experience growing up and being part of a big family. That was how we celebrated holidays. It's how we marked milestones. If I got a good report card, I could pick what we were having for dinner the next night, right? And so I grew up with this really close connection with food. Always knew I wanted to work in the industry. Fast forward many years, I got my MBA. I started my career actually working at General Mills. And worked across the full spectrum of brands, kind of from Gushers, Fruit Roll Up, and Fruit by the Foot, which was my first role, all the way to Annie's, which is, of course, an organic kids brand, which was my last role at General Mills. And it was during my time working on Annie's that I would say I really fell in love with the natural product industry, this idea of business, as a force for good, importance of ingredient quality. It was very much an educational experience for me. And the opportunity that I saw in the market was really around global cuisine and kind of cultural foods, for lack of a better term. Growing up in Brooklyn, it was very much this Black and Latino melting pot. And so a ton of the foods that I ate growing up were Creole, Caribbean, and Latin American foods. Either the things that my mother had grown up eating in the South, where she's from, South Carolina, or the recipes that we exchanged with our neighbors, with our classmates, from eating from local restaurants, right? And so the whole idea with A Dozen Cousins was, to try to create a brand that felt really cultural and really authentic, but to do it with the best possible ingredients, really convenient formats, really innovative in terms of the benefits that we're presenting. And so essentially we have 3 product lines. The first is a line of ready-to-eat beans. They're all fully cooked and seasoned. They're made with real vegetables and spices. They're cooked in avocado oil. We then launched our rices that are cooked in bone broth. So essentially they have 7 grams of protein, a few grams of collagen in every serving. And then finally, we have our seasoning sauces, which essentially help you make a restaurant quality entree dish in just 20 minutes or less. And so that's kind of the brand in a nutshell. We're thankfully have had good success. We're available nationwide at Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. We're available regionally at Walmart, Target, Publix, etc. And maybe I'll end on a quick personal note, which is that I live in Los Angeles now with my wife and 2 daughters. So we've exceeded a dozen cousins, but keeping the name where it is. But that's me in a nutshell, and happy to dig into the other questions you guys have.
You're the baker's dozen now, apparently.
Exactly, but I have a lot of younger siblings who are going to be adding more cousins.
It's a dozen cousins and counting.
And counting. So Ibrahim, I think you first came on my radar at one of the expos. I can't remember how many years ago it was, but got enamored with the story and the thinking behind it, but also recognizing the industry has started to, really focus on world cuisine and world foods and also diversity within the industry, which is great. Really curious, how was your transition? Like we work with a lot of entrepreneurs, Steve and I, and how was your transition from big food down to entrepreneurship all of a sudden? Was anybody an entrepreneur in your family? How did you decide to drop those big salaries, those big food companies, and do this thing on your own?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's funny you mentioned my family because my father was an entrepreneur. So I grew up, and he actually owned a grocery store for a lot of my childhood, ironically enough. But he had tons of different small businesses. So he had different times in my childhood had a small taxi fleet, a grocery store. He ran an extermination business, a driving instructor school. So obviously with 10 kids, he really valued the flexibility that entrepreneurship brought, right? And the ability to kind of care for us, but also have that control over his time and his schedule. But I grew up feeling like entrepreneurship was ultimately going to be my end goal. You know what I mean? It just felt like a very natural landing point. And, for me, I was just waiting for the right idea, if you will, right? Like I wanted something that I could really sink my teeth into. The reality is, as you guys either know or have observed, starting a company, it can become all encompassing, and so if you're going to spend 6-7 days a week working on something for 5 or 10 years, it needs to be something that you're really passionate about and that you're excited about. And that was certainly the case with a dozen cousins and the idea. So, for me, it's been, I would say, relatively smooth transition. There's certainly some adjustments when you leave a multi-billion-dollar company, right, where budgets are very comfortable. You can kind of, a lot of cushion to make mistakes, a lot of extra padding. Whereas here, we need to be really smart, efficient, mindful in terms of how we're spending dollars. We need to be careful that the mistakes we make aren't fatal to the company, right? They need to be mistakes that you can kind of bounce back from. And so definitely there's been some adjustments, but overall, I'd say it's been a fun experience.
Yeah. I know that there are a lot of people on a similar journey right now. Have any advice for those people who are considering doing this? Like they're out there right now, maybe listening to this interview. Is it just sort of a go for it mentality, or what advice would you give an early stage thinker right now if they're thinking about doing something or following their passion?
Yeah, honestly, the first piece of advice I'll give them is like, how far along can you take it before you have to go full time, right? And I know that maybe the opposite advice of some other entrepreneurship people, but for me, like, there's a lot you can do at night and on the weekends to hone an idea, to test it, to shape it, to polish it, or at least get it ready to like where you have the internal confidence and like, okay, this is ready for me now to go sink my teeth into. And I have been bouncing around the idea of a dozen cousins for many months before I quit my job and went after it, right? So that'll be my first piece of advice. And then my second piece of advice would be to just like set clear milestones and like guardrails for yourself, right? So like, if you're going to give yourself 6 months to get the product in market, or 1 year to start seeing some traction, or 2 years to begin paying yourself a salary, right? Like whatever those milestones are, I think they'll keep you honest. And just kind of force you to assess the progress along the way, and that's something that we did here as well, where I felt like, look, if we're not seeing certain markers of success, maybe there's something wrong with the idea, or maybe we need to take a second look at it, or what have you. And thankfully we've been able to kind of progress along the journey that way.
Yeah, that's great. I love the milestones approach. I think it's really smart. Do you have a group of people around you now? Is the company gotten bigger in terms of staffing, and do you have an advisory board? How do you kind of make decisions going forward from this point?
Yeah, so we have 6 full-time employees and, a director of supply chain, a VP of sales, several marketing team members. And so I feel like we have good, operational hands on deck, if you will, in terms of like
Mhm.
people who are running the business day to day. And then we have great investors and advisors, right? And so,
Mhm.
in our case, a lot of our earliest investors were former founders and CEOs in the CPG industry. And so a lot of them have, number one, their own personal experience of building a company and the journey that they went on, but then they also have maybe a portfolio of other companies that they invest and advise to. And so they're able to kind of,
Mhm.
share learnings and triangulate data that way. And so it's been very beneficial for me to have those folks.
Yeah. Really curious about some other questions related to the business itself, supply chain, for instance, and future innovation. I'm sure you have some things on the horizon there. How's the supply chain for you right now? And what are your big challenges going forward in terms of innovation or distribution?
Yeah, I'll speak high level. Obviously, as you can imagine, some of this stuff is not necessarily for public
Yeah,
consumption, right?
sure.
But I would say, like on the supply chain side, as many companies at my stage are experiencing, this has been a rough multiple years, right? And so,
Mhm. Mhm.
whether that was from extreme demand, kind of in the early COVID era, right, where the battle was like, okay, how can you keep up with what people are
Yeah.
trying to buy? Then, kind of in the later COVID era, it came around availability, right, with like the portage challenges and
Yeah.
freight shortages and so on. Then we've entered kind of the third phase, which is just around inflation, right? Where, input costs are really high.
Yeah.
Labor markets are really tight, particularly around manufacturing in certain regions, right? And so um, that's the journey we're on, right? And so like our job is just each quarter to come up with the best plan possible to kind of supply the business at the cost we need to, right? And so we're doing that work. And then the second question was around innovation. And again, I'll speak at a somewhat high level and
Yeah.
just say like, what
Fine.
we're really focused on is kind of 3 pillars around convenience, culture, and health, right? So everything we do, we want it to feel authentic to the regions that we pull from. We want to use the best ingredients available in that category. We were the first brand to bring avocado oil into the bean category, obviously very nutrient dense, at a time when a lot of brands are still using lard or canola oil or what have you, right? In the rice category, we brought bone broth into the category with, protein and collagen and rice, which was, very unique. And so that's kind of the journey we're on. Is like, how do we bring just really high quality ingredients and health benefits into the meals in the side space?
Yeah, that was well said, and I posed the question only because I know that you're thinking about a lot of things as you're growing a business, and one of them is distribution points. And I'm curious about your channel strategy. Do you guys, have sort of a balance between online or direct to consumer and retail? Or are you strictly at retail right now?
We're certainly a retail first business. You can buy the product through our website and direct to
Yeah.
consumer, but it's never been a large part of our business. I think
Okay. Huh.
candidly in the categories that we're in, which I think of as kind of the pantry, if you will,
Yeah.
consumers actually find value in shopping at retail, whether that's brick and mortar or digital retail, like a Thrive Market, which is a great customer for us, or
Yeah.
Amazon, right? Where
Mhm.
you don't want to necessarily be going to 15 different websites to order your beans, your rice, your salt, your pepper. You know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
value in getting it all in one spot. And
Yeah.
so we've
Yeah.
kind of embraced that, and we think of ourselves very much as like a retail first business, whether it's online or in brick and mortar.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally understand and appreciate that. Level of thinking. So basically, you're now focused on adding additional retail locations. That'll be your strategy going forward.
That and expanding assortment, right? So we have now 3 different product lines. So we have some great retailers that are just carrying one of the 3, right? Where they carry our beans, the beans are doing well, and now we have an opportunity to add in the rice, or they're carrying the beans and the rice, but we want to add in the sauce. So I'm really excited about the next year or two for our business, because I feel like we've done a lot of the hard work, which is getting your foot in the door, demonstrating that the product has value with consumers, and then the rest tends to just be mathematics, right? In terms of like, how many doors does your velocity warrant? And most good retailers will get you into that right equilibrium.
Yep,
Well,
exactly.
your brand is building a really solid reputation, which enables, like you say, you started with the beans, but as that brand gets popular, it enables you to expand the line, like you say. And boy, the rice is just so complimentary. It makes so much sense, and the sauces too. And I'm sure you're exploring logical product extensions. One thing that sticks out for me going all the way back, you mentioned you received an MBA. It's almost like you've been planning on this from the very beginning. Did you know you always wanted to go into food? You did your MBA. You almost did a post MBA at General Mills. It seems to me you might have got your doctorate there.
Yeah.
And then you decided to launch. And then the advice of, moonlighting as you launch before you can jump full time to it. It's like, don't quit your day gig, right, just yet till you're ready. So I think those are some key points I've been hearing in your story so far a little bit.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that, getting that education that you did before you launched your own brand?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it's always like this fine balance, right? Because on the one hand, first of all, can you guys hear and see me? The screen is frozen on my end.
We're good.
Okay. So I was saying, it's a fine balance, right? On the one hand, I do feel very fortunate that I got a chance to just learn, right? And I think, at a place like General Mills, a lot of it comes from the people, where it's like, man, I'm not sure how to think about this particular challenge. Let me go grab coffee with this person, or let me have lunch with this person and hear how they approach it on Cheerios, right? Or you have a lot of that, just like case studies and osmosis of knowledge that takes place that I do really value. I also think, candidly, by the time I had left General Mills, I had launched, 10 or 12 different products between, snacks, meals, across categories. I pitched retailers before. So when I came to do it for a dozen cousins, it was not my first time. And so there's, I think, a certain value even in just the learnings that you get on your own of like, man, I wish I wouldn't have done it that way. Or, you make a mistake and you're like, I won't do that again, right? So I value all those things. What I will say, the flip side of it, and why I have a ton of respect and appreciation for people who didn't get that experience, is that sometimes I need to look at the world with like a fresh set of eyes, like it's 2023. The reality is this isn't the same world that I was working in when I was at General Mills. You know what I mean? Whether that's in terms of the role of TikTok, the role of short form video in marketing, the changes in distribution and the way COVID impacted how people are shopping and consuming products, right? The fact that people are working from home now and how that changes a lot of people's consumption patterns, right? So it's like, you have to balance the experience you have with like, okay, what's happening right now? What's the landscape today? So I try to find that balance, but certainly value the experience that I had.
Yeah. Yeah. Curious, as we look to the future, what do you think, where is your end game for you? What are you thinking about the brand in the long run here? And what do you hope will happen? And I know you can't predict the future, but you have to think about it, right? As you got your hands around a growing brand here, like, what do you hope to happen in the future?
Yeah, for me, number one, the North Star and the thing that I think about very often is that, I want the brand to be around 20 or 30 years from now, right? If I think about my favorite food brands and even my favorite cereal, to be super specific, it's the same cereal that I was eating since I was a little kid, right? So it's talking about 30 plus years of brand loyalty, consumption, love, et cetera. So that to me is the gold standard for a CPG or a food brand, right? How do you become part of people's lives? How do you become synonymous with the cuisines and the regions that we're focused on? And now obviously there's a lot that goes underneath that, right? In terms of, you need to have great products, you need to have an evocative brand, the price value needs to make sense, the gross margins need to make sense so that the business is sustainable, so on and so forth. So there's a lot that keeps me busy on the day-to-day, but that's what I'm building towards, right? It's like a generational brand that whether I'm involved in it in the future or not, the brand has meaning, people understand it, they know what the products stand for, and they kind of want them in their home.
That's so really interesting response, Steve. Like, I've talked to so many entrepreneurs, right? Never have heard that response from an entrepreneur.
I'm learning a lot myself. I'm learning something in this little podcast myself here.
Yeah, it is very interesting because you talk about building a legacy brand, which talking to a lot of early stage entrepreneurs or even mid stage entrepreneurs, that's not what they're trying to do. A lot of times they're trying to build something and then get out from under it, right? Like sell it, move on, do something else. but I just love this. And I have to ask you, what cereal? I mean, come on, you got to tell us what cereal you've been eating.
Man, I can't say, but here's what I'll say. And the reason I can't say is because it is not a General Mills cereal, but I have to show loyalty to people. So I have love for General Mills, and my all-time favorite cereal comes from another manufacturer that I won't mention, but
Yeah, you
I
got to be
enjoy it.
true to your school.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a lot, I've been really enjoying how, your thought process in approaching your business. But it's more than that for you too. And, will there be, I have two questions. Are there people from your family involved in the business, or will they be in the future? And then really what I am impressed with is your mission to create opportunities for other people of color in the natural products channel in
Yeah.
particular, and in food and specialty food. And, that's really paying it forward. So two questions, kind of your family involvement in the business, and then again, around Project Potluck and your mission there.
Yeah. Really good, Steve. Thanks.
Yeah, so for the first question, none of my family is like our full-time employees in the company or heavily involved in the business. We obviously have, as you can imagine, a very active group chat, right, where I'll throw out ideas or get their thoughts on things that I'm launching, or get them samples of new items before they launch, right? So there's that kind of informal involvement, but no one that's really day-to-day in the business. And part of that's just because they have their own passions and their own interests. In my family, I have educators, I have physical therapists, I have people working in all sorts of fields, and it didn't feel right or needed for me to like try to recruit them all into the food industry, right? They have their own things they're pursuing. So that's the first. And then the second, around Project Potluck, which, I started with Asha of Mason Dixie and Arnulfo of Alter Eco. And we now have an executive director in place, Kathleen Casanova. So I just want to give those people shout outs as well. And, in case you want to find them.
What's the website for Project Potluck? Can people go visit?
It's potluckcpg.org. So potluckcpg.org.
Thank you.
Yeah, but the genesis of it ultimately was, kind of as you alluded to, when I started the company back in 2019, 2018, a place like an Expo West or Fancy Food, or kind of all the places that you might expect to find of gatherings of people in the industry, there weren't a ton of brands led by people of color. There weren't a ton of us there, and that's no knock on those particular shows, right? That's just a reflection of kind of participation and involvement in the industry at large. So, what I felt like was like, look, if you look at the country, depending on the data set, you look at anywhere from 40 to 50% of all people are, identifying as being a person of color, right? That number is expected to grow with Gen Z. And so if we're making products that are meant to serve that community, though, that populace, then the people making them should kind of look like that, right? There should be some level of representation there. And some of that is just to make the best products and to make the best brands, right? Like if you want to solve people's problems and speak about those solutions in a way that they understand and that they gravitate towards, it helps to have that level of empathy and connection. And so we launched Project Potluck with a very simple mission, which was to help people of color build successful companies and careers in the industry. And, I think we've had success that we're really proud of just in the short time that we've been doing it. We have many hundreds of members. We've had a chance to host events. We've had a chance to connect, I want to say, over 200 people with mentors in the industry, people who have more experience and can help kind of guide their earlier stage ventures. And so, we're really proud of the work we've been doing, and it's something that's very close to my heart.
That's really cool. Yeah, I know that the Naturally Network has done work with Project Potluck, and I know Expos East and West have started to recognize this. And so, kudos to you for like just getting something going and supporting that. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing how the industry sort of come around to DEI over a slow period of time, but it's about damn time. So good.
Ideas, they all have their time, right? Like, it feels like in the last few years, due to a confluence of events, right? Whether you go back to the death of George Floyd, the rise in the Black Matters movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, rather, and just a lot of other just things, they kind of all coalesce around the same time. And I think now it's night and day in terms of even when I started the company, going back to A Dozen Cousins a little bit of like just the recognition and the understanding that like, look, we need representation on shelves in the industry with the products that we're making. It feels very different than it did even years ago.
Yeah. Do you,
And more than that, you're bringing great flavors to the table. I mean,
yeah,
I for one really appreciate the spice, the culture, everything in my food. So you're appealing to across demographics, I
yeah.
think. With
And
I agree, but thank you for saying that.
I was thinking about that earlier too with your distribution strategy. You know, mainstream grocery, man, you'll be there. You'll be there in the big supermarkets. I can just feel it because that's where America's shopping right now for sure. So, you know, good on you. I think you'll get out there into a wider community, broader base of distribution. And I think the reason is because the flavors and the mission are resonating. So yeah, it's just a good time, really good time. And timing is everything sometimes with the business launch, isn't it?
I agree. And thank you for saying that. We're confident as well. You know, to your point, I think conventional grocery, mainstream retail, like that's where you get into some of those questions I was talking about of just where the country is going, right? In terms of the embracing of global flavors, regardless of your own personal background, right? The reliance on convenience and like the decline in the amount of time people want to spend cooking, right? Like all those things kind of impact the, you know, brand like ours.
Yeah. We
and
only have
still be able to eat healthy.
right,
You know?
exactly.
So
And bring
that's the challenge.
uniqueness to and a story to America's tables. You know, we only have a few minutes left. I'm just wondering if there's any thoughts you'd like to share with us on you know, not only the entrepreneurial journey, but the journey of yourself in this world of food and this diversity that's happening today. Any final thinking on that, or do you have a book coming out or anything? Yeah, I guess. Like let's hype you and your company right now if we can for the next few minutes.
Yeah, you know, first and foremost, thank you again for the opportunity to come and speak. I think a lot of these questions hopefully have highlighted what we're trying to do with A Dozen Cousins. So I hope it's all served as a, you know, an invitation to people who are listening to try out the brand. You know, with that said, you can find us at www.adozencousins.com. You can find us on Instagram at A Dozen Cousins. Come check out the products, see what we're all about as a company. But you know, I think I feel like I presented the brand well, so I won't get too pitchy here in the close. Except to say that, you know, we're focused on culture and convenience, and you know, I think the products are really strong.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a question, and that is, again, if we have a lot of leaders that with us that are seasoned that may be interested in being a mentor in Project Potluck. How could they go about perhaps doing that, or contacting someone?
Yeah, so I think the website is the right place to start, potluckcpg.org. I believe there's guide flows that will take you through how to sign up as a mentor, how to reach out and ask a question. So I would start at the website for sure.
And same if I were an emerging entrepreneur of color, go to, again, it's potluckcpg.org.
That's right. That's the place to start for all people.
Yep.
Well, folks, if you haven't tried A Dozen Cousins, I mean, again, the quality of the product speaks for itself. I'm going to try some of your rices to go with this. And Ibraheem, we are so grateful for you taking time out of your busy day to address our audience and to speak with us. It's great to get to know you for a little bit. And will you be at Natural Products Expo East by any chance in September?
I will. We won't be exhibiting as a brand, but I'll be there and around. I'll be attending some meetings, and checking out the show floor like everyone else. So hopefully, if anyone wants to connect, hit me up on LinkedIn. That's the best way to reach me. But we'll love to see like-minded folks when we get to Philly.
That's great.
We'll look forward to seeing you there. We'll be there as well.
Sounds good. Thank you guys. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for this episode of Compass Coffee Talk. Bill Capsalis, my co-host, thank you very, very much. Ibraheem Basir, keep up all your great work, man. You're feeding the world with some really good stuff. Everybody, you have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Our next episode in October features the founder of Jack and Annie's, which is bringing meat alternatives using jackfruit. and learn the story of jackfruit and the supply chain that Annie Ryu, a young entrepreneur, very bold, courageous, audacious, building an entire global jackfruit supply chain to bring some really delicious plant-based foods to consumers. And that'll be, again, Annie Ryu, I think it's October 19, here at Compass Coffee Talk. You all be well, and we'll see you soon. Bye now.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay.